Hi, my name is Bruce Arant. I'm an author and illustrator of children's books. I mostly illustrate for other people, but I have a couple of books I want to talk to you about today that I actually wrote and illustrated. Before becoming an illustrator, I was involved in publishing for nearly 20 years as an editor for book and magazines in the architectural field. But in 2009, when the economy crashed, my job went away. And long story short, I decided to take the plunge into illustrating. I had always dreamed of being an illustrator, but never had the guts to actually leave a job to go do that. But when my job left me, I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. So that was back in 2009. And since then, I've illustrated maybe 20 books, mostly for other authors. But as I said, I've got two books that I also wrote. Simpson's Sheep Won't Go to Sleep. And then that came out in 2013, and in 2017, Simpson's Sheep Just Want to Sleep. So, as much as I love drawing and as much as I love writing, my favorite thing is really engaging audiences. I love going to schools, I love going to libraries, and I've figured out just recently, I think I've spoken to between 50 and 60,000 students over the last 6 or 7 years, and that's a conservative estimate. These sessions that I do are 45 minutes, give or take, and I would like to tell you about at least what I do for libraries. I've got 6 different programs for schools, but I do 3 presentations for libraries. The first one I'll tell you about is what I just call picture book illustrating. I want kids to understand, I want students or patrons to understand that picture books don't just appear on the shelf. They start with a messy, scribbly little sketch from the artist, the illustrator. And one thing I show the kids, and I would show your patrons, is how a picture really comes to life. I use this one as an example, and I do a lot of drawing actually throughout the whole presentation. I do a lot of drawing of other things, but when I get to this part about actual picture books, this is what I show them. So this is a scene where in this book, Farmer Simpson is telling his sheep to go to sleep. It's time to go to bed, and they stand up and they start having the excuses. Well, I was thinking about that scene, and I thought, how am I going to illustrate that? What should I do? And I thought, maybe I'll draw it as if I were one of the sheep. I'm kind of down low looking up towards Farmer Simpson. So this was my first sketch, just to get the idea down on the paper. And that's what I tell kids. I say, it's about getting your idea down. You don't have to make it perfect the first time. So that looks kind of like the idea of it, at least. It's not ready to put in a picture book though, is it? Then I made it a little bit better. And you can see where I had the sheep, they were larger, and I erased them and made them smaller. I tell kids, I erase more than I draw, probably, because there's nothing wrong with erasing. It's part of the creative process. Because some kids think, oh, I can't erase because I made a mistake. No, it's just part of the process. Then I made it a little bit better. I thought, I want 3 sheep, so I made it with 3 sheep, and I redrew Farmer Simpson, but I really did not like Farmer Simpson there. So then I redrew it again, and that's kind of where I came with this one. Now I'll show you another one real quick. The next spread is where all the sheep are up, telling him all of their excuses why they should stay awake. And I thought, what would it look like if a farmer was out in his field and his sheep were just running around like crazy? So this was my first sketch of that. And then I made it a little bit bigger where I could really see it. And here's a sheep tickle fight. I thought, what does a sheep tickle fight really look like? And then I thought, well, I'll make it better yet. So I did this, and I liked that, but I could only see the side of Farmer Simpson. So I thought, what would it be like if with my imagination muscles, which I talk about with the kids, with my imagination muscles, what if I turned him a little bit? So I did. So that looks like that guy, right? So that is how I ended up with the scene. And now what you end up with is what's called a line drawing. Well, a line drawing kind of looks like a coloring book. And I thought, well, I'm not making a coloring book, I'm making a picture book. How will I color it? So I did this. This is called a test sheet. where I tested all different types of mediums, and I talked to kids about mediums. What are mediums? They're the things you make the pictures out of. And I hated it. I didn't like any of this, and I thought, oh, it doesn't look right. My sheep aren't soft. So I asked a friend of mine at the art store. I said, how can I make my sheep look soft? And the advice I got was, have you ever tried chalk pastels? I had never used chalk pastels before because they're so messy, but I thought, well, I will try it. So these were my very first sheep. I thought, oh, those look pretty soft. And I thought, I like this guy so much, I'm going to make him even softer. So there he is, and I liked him so much, I made all of the sheep super soft. So that's how I learned how to draw the sheep for the picture book. This is a picture of Farmer Simpson here, sitting in the moonlight. I just wanted to experiment a little bit with that as well. So that, I show kids, that's how pictures come about. You start with a messy sketch that gets better and better and better until you come up with the final art. Now, I talk a lot about using your imagination muscles, and at the very end of that session, I say, now, as much as I enjoyed drawing these pictures, and I had so much fun, you guys are going to have much more fun than I did, because today we are going to exercise your imagination muscles. We're going to together create an animal that has never existed, because you're going to tell me what kind of a head, and what kind of a neck, and body, and legs, from all different animals and creatures. I'm going to put them together into one crazy looking creature, and the kids just, they love it. So we end up with something that looks like this. I just brought one to show. There's a bird head, and an elephant ear, and a giraffe neck, and turtle body, and so on and so forth. But it's a great way to exercise one's imagination. That has become a really popular aspect of that presentation. So that's what the picture book presentation is. Another presentation that I do is the illustration workshop. This has been very, very popular at libraries and at schools, both with children and adults, because everybody can do it. And a lot of people, I've had so many teachers, in fact, or other adults come up to me afterwards and say, I can't draw a stick figure, but I was able to do this. Well, I'll show you what I do in the illustration workshop. The point of the workshop is to show how an illustrator has to think, the thought process when you're depicting emotion in a character, and I really get the audience involved in doing the same thing. They get to experience what I do as an illustrator. For example, if I have a character that is worried, well, and I only draw, by the way, I show them how to draw 20 different facial expressions, but we only do the eyes and the eyebrows and the mouth, and I explain to them that that's the window into what you're thinking, right? Your ears don't tell what you're thinking. Your nose or your hair, if you have hair, doesn't show what you're thinking. It's your eyes and eyebrows and mouth. So that's what we focus on. So if we have a character who is worried, well, what does that look like? How do you draw a worried facial expression? I'll just do one here, and I just do these big simple eyes. So there's the eyes here. I'm going to put the eyeballs over here. I'm going to make the eyebrows like this. Well, this one's going to be straight. This one's going to be bowed. And now the mouth is going to look like this. It's not really a frown, but it's kind of drawn down. So that's worried, and I always have them draw it out, or write it out rather. Worried. What about, let's see, what about bored? Hopefully you're not bored listening to this, but what if you were? What does bored look like? Bored is very simple, and we've been drawing these big round eyes, but this time we're just going to do a line here, a line here. I'm going to put the eyeball right underneath that. The eyebrow is going to be like, oh hum, I am so bored. And the mouth is going to be down here, like this. Bored. Now what if we had a character who was mischievous? Well, what does mischievous look like? This is actually my favorite one, I think. We're going to draw it looks like two baked beans instead of circles. I'm going to put the eyeballs way over here. I'm going to do a kind of a half smile with a little cheek mark. And now here is the key to the mischievous facial expression. This eyebrow goes straight down this way. The other one swoops up. Mischievous. M-I-S-C-H-V-O-U-S. So in the whole process, I show 20 different facial expressions. This is an example, and I have a whole routine that makes it funny and silly. But they learn these 20, and then at the end of that, they actually illustrate a character from a little story that I bring along, and they get to actually experience illustrating a character according to what emotion they're supposed to show. That is the illustration workshop. The third presentation that I do for libraries is just called Picture Book Changes. One thing that I want to show is how many changes that you have to go through when you're making a picture book, both in the writing and the illustrating. I mostly emphasize the illustration side of it because it's more fun to look at. But here's an example of what I show. In this Simpson Sheep Won't Go to Sleep, there was this scene here in the book. Well, when I first drew it, and the art director at Peter Pauper Press looked at it, she said, you know, I want something different. This is actually the line drawing right here of how I depicted the scene. The sheep have fallen asleep. Farmer Simpson wants us to be quiet, and so he's going shh like this. Well, that's what the scene looked like. They're out in the meadow, and the art director said, you know what? We had a barn earlier in the story that we could see. I'd like to see the barn. And so I thought, well, okay, what am I going to do? So this was my first sketch for the barn. I hope you can see that. It's kind of light. But I have the barn. I just have some little circles there for where the sheep are going to be, and just a little scribbly thing for Farmer Simpson. And then from there, I made it better. I actually drew it out to scale, and there's Farmer Simpson. I actually switched him over to this side. I drew out the barn. This is the actual dimension of the real page spread, and then did a lot of cutting and pasting. I knew how big that was going to be, because here's the actual scene. One thing that's interesting to me about this scene was lighting, because I wanted to show it was at nighttime, but I wanted to give the illusion of a barn light. So do you see this dotted line here? That's where I wanted the light to fall. And I drew the entire scene, and then the scariest part of the whole thing was I covered the entire scene with gray chalk dust, except for right there. And that's what made it look like the light was shining. So that was one of the changes. I had many changes throughout the entire book. Another thing that happened was spot art changes. Now, spot art it's these little pictures here right across from the main scene. And I had ideas. I have 9 spot arts in this particular book. I had ideas that I wanted to share with the art director, and I thought this would be a good one. This is Farmer Simpson works all day. He plants his corn and beans and hay. Well, I thought it would be fun to kind of show a little, like a dog chasing him on his tractor here. Well, she didn't like that, apparently. So they wanted corn, so I had to do corn. So we ended up with corn. I had others that, like, for instance, I'll do this real quick here. His feet get tired. His nose gets red. At night, he likes to go to bed. Well, I thought I'll show him in his, like, an old-fashioned nightcap and nightgown and his bed and this little puppy again. Well, apparently, they didn't want the puppy at all or anything else. So they wanted a sheep. So, I had a second scene of the sun going down. They didn't like that. So here's what we ended up with: a sheep, and that was fine. It's called being art directed, and I was getting direction from the art director, and that's what we ended up with. There's the sheep. So there's that type of stuff that you just go through in terms of making changes. You have to learn how to be very collaborative, very cooperative, and I share that with the kids. So that is the session on picture book changes. It's kind of a behind the scenes look at what has to be changed before you can come up with the final picture book. Well, thank you for considering my presentations for your patrons. I would love to come to your library and meet them and engage with them. If you have questions about pricing or to schedule me for a visit, please get a hold of me either by email or give me a call. My email is bruce@arantcreative.com, and my phone number is area code 571-225-2799. Thanks again, and I look forward to meeting you.